Standing in my childhood bedroom, I stared at the family photos lining the dresser where my face had been literally cut out of every single frame. Downstairs, my golden child brother Marcus was being celebrated for his promotion to Navy lieutenant, while I had been deliberately excluded from the gathering. The devastating realization hit me that my own parents, aunts, uncles, and extended family had systematically erased my existence from their lives. What they did not know was that tomorrow I would be promoted to Navy SEAL commander, outranking Marcus by 3 full levels in a ceremony that would change everything forever. I pulled into the circular driveway of our family estate in Virginia Beach. Virginia, watching through the large windows as relatives I had not seen in months, moved around the spacious living room with champagne glasses raised in celebration. The colonial-style mansion where I grew up looked the same from the outside, but something felt fundamentally different as I approached the front door. My father, Robert, answered before I could knock, his expression shifting from anticipation to mild disappointment when he saw me instead of another guest. "Oh, Johnnie, you made it after all." His tone carried the same enthusiasm someone might use when commenting on unexpected rain during a picnic. "This is a big day for your brother," he continued, patting my shoulder as if I were a child rather than a 28-year-old man who had served 3 tours overseas. "We're so proud of his accomplishments." The way he emphasized his made it clear that pride was a finite resource in the Miller household, and Marcus had claimed the entire supply. Inside, the celebration was in full swing. My mother, Patricia, glided between clusters of relatives, her face glowing with the kind of maternal pride I had not seen directed toward me in years. She wore her best pearl necklace and the navy blue dress she reserved for the most important occasions. When she spotted me, her smile flickered briefly before returning to its practiced brightness. "Everyone, look who finally decided to join us," she announced, though her tone suggested my presence was more obligation than joy. The room turned toward me with polite but distant acknowledgments before quickly returning to their conversations about Marcus's achievement. My grandmother Helen, who had helped raise me during my parents' frequent business trips, stood near the fireplace surrounded by photo displays of Marcus in his dress uniform. She had always been my strongest advocate, but today she offered only a brief nod before turning back to her conversation with Aunt Sarah about Marcus's bright future in naval command. Uncle David, my father's brother who used to take me fishing every summer, was deep in conversation with my cousin Tyler about Marcus's strategic thinking and natural leadership abilities. When I approached their group, David's greeting felt perfunctory, lacking the warmth that had characterized our relationship throughout my childhood. "Johnnie, good to see you," David said without making eye contact. "We were just discussing how Marcus has really found his calling in the military. It takes a special kind of person to excel in that environment." The comment stung because David knew perfectly well that I had been serving longer than Marcus and had been deployed to combat zones while Marcus completed his training stateside. But tonight those details seemed irrelevant to everyone present. Marcus stood at the center of the room near the bay windows, still wearing his dress uniform from the promotion ceremony earlier that day. He looked every bit the part of a rising military star, with his pressed jacket displaying his new lieutenant insignia and his confident posture suggesting someone accustomed to command. When he saw me, he raised his champagne glass in my direction. "There's my little brother," Marcus called out, using the diminutive that had always bothered me since I was only 2 years younger and now taller than him by 3 inches. "Thanks for coming to celebrate with us." The gathered relatives applauded politely, and I noticed how naturally they all looked to Marcus as the evening's focal point. My cousin Madison approached with her usual bright smile, but even her greeting felt somehow rehearsed. "It's so exciting about Marcus," she gushed. "Mom was telling me about all the responsibilities he'll have now. It must be amazing to have such an accomplished brother to look up to." I nodded and managed appropriate responses, but something felt fundamentally wrong about the entire evening. Walking through the house where I had spent 18 years of my life, I noticed subtle changes that collectively created an unsettling picture. The hallway that had once displayed both Marcus's and my school achievements now showcased only his accomplishments. My high school valedictorian plaque was gone from its place near the front staircase. The display case that had held my college scholarship certificates now contained only Marcus's military training awards. Even the family timeline photo wall had been reorganized to minimize my presence while highlighting Marcus's milestones. During Marcus's speech to the assembled family, he spoke eloquently about military honor service to country and the importance of family support in achieving success. He thanked our parents for their unwavering belief in his potential and acknowledged various relatives for their encouragement throughout his career. But in 15 minutes of remarks, he never once mentioned my own military service or acknowledged that he had a brother who had been deployed overseas while he completed his training. The omission felt deliberate rather than accidental, especially when several relatives who knew about my service said nothing to correct the implication that Marcus was the family's only military member. I found myself wondering when I had become invisible to people who had known me my entire life. As the evening progressed, conversations flowed around me without including me. Relatives discussed Marcus's future prospects, his potential for advancement, and the pride he brought to the family name. When I attempted to contribute to discussions about military life or share relevant experiences from my own service, the responses were polite but dismissive, as if my perspective carried no real authority on subjects where I had actual expertise. The breaking point came when I overheard my mother, Patricia, talking to her sister near the kitchen entrance. "We're so blessed to have Marcus representing our family in the military," she said, her voice carrying the satisfaction of a parent whose child had exceeded all expectations. "It's wonderful to finally have a son who has made something of himself and understands the importance of family values." The words hit like a physical blow because they implied that I had failed to make something of myself, despite years of military service and personal achievements that I had thought made my parents proud. But more devastating was the phrase, "finally have a son," as if I had never existed or had somehow ceased to qualify for that designation. Later, while helping clear champagne glasses, I found myself alone in my father's study and noticed a legal document left open on his mahogany desk. The heading read, "Last Will and Testament Amendment," and as I scanned the visible portions, my blood turned cold. The document showed that my inheritance had been completely transferred to Marcus, and my name had been removed from all references to family business assets and future distributions. This was not simply emotional neglect or favoritism. This was a calculated legal erasure of my existence from the family's financial future, executed with the same precision Marcus was now being celebrated for demonstrating in his military career. The realization that my own parents had taken formal legal steps to write me out of their lives left me standing in that study surrounded by family photos that no longer included my face, understanding that tomorrow's Navy SEAL promotion ceremony would reveal just how catastrophically wrong they had been about both of their sons. The next morning, I returned to the family estate while my parents attended church with Marcus using my spare key to conduct what felt like an archaeological dig through my own childhood. The house was quiet except for the grandfather clock in the hallway marking each passing minute as I methodically searched for evidence of what had happened to my place in this family. In the basement storage area, I discovered cardboard boxes labeled with my name, stacked behind Christmas decorations and old furniture like artifacts from a life that no longer mattered. Inside these boxes, I found every trace of my existence that had been systematically removed from the visible areas of the house. My Little League trophies, carefully wrapped in newspaper, sat next to academic achievement awards from elementary through high school. The science fair ribbons I had won 3 consecutive years were bundled together with graduation photos, Eagle Scout certificates, and even my first military commendation letters. Everything that had once represented my accomplishments and milestones now resided in storage containers as if I were deceased. The discovery that hurt most was finding my baptism photo, the confirmation pictures from age 16, and family vacation snapshots where I had been carefully cut out and replaced with enlarged versions of Marcus alone. Someone had taken considerable time and effort to recreate these images without any trace of my participation in family memories. My childhood bedroom had been completely transformed into Marcus's home office. His Naval Academy diploma hung where my high school honor roll certificates used to be. His computer occupied the desk where I had written college application essays, and his military reference books filled the shelves that had once held my science and history collections. Even my twin bed had been replaced with a leather chair and reading lamp, creating a space that bore no resemblance to the room where I had spent 18 years of my life. It was as if the second son had never existed, and Marcus had always been an only child, deserving of a larger, more sophisticated space. While searching through my father's home office filing cabinet, I discovered phone records that revealed a pattern of communication I had not previously understood. Over the past 6 months, my parents had made dozens of calls to relatives, family, friends, and community members. Next to many of these numbers, my father had written notes like, explained Johnnie's situation, and discussed concerns about stability. Reading through his appointment calendar, I found entries that made my stomach clench. Lunch with Pastor Williams to discuss Johnnie's behavior changes. Coffee with the Hendersons to address Johnnie questions. Call Dr. Peterson about Johnnie's mental health recommendations. These entries corresponded with periods when I had been deployed overseas, meaning my parents had been having conversations about my supposed psychological problems while I was serving my country in combat zones. They had been building a narrative about my character and stability based on completely fabricated concerns. In a folder marked Family Finances, I discovered bank statements showing that educational funds originally designated for both Marcus and me had been consolidated entirely for Marcus's benefit. The account that was supposed to support my graduate school plans now showed zero balance, with transfer records indicating the money had been moved to Marcus's name 6 months earlier. More disturbing were copies of checks I had sent home during my deployments money I had contributed to help with family expenses and household improvements. These funds had been deposited into accounts that were now solely controlled by Marcus, meaning my own financial contributions to the family had been redirected to benefit the brother who was systematically replacing me. The pattern extended beyond finances into social connections. I found copies of emails my mother had sent to family friends, church members, and community organizations. In these messages, she expressed concern about my increasingly erratic behavior and asked for understanding if I seemed distant or troubled during social interactions. She had told the Hendersons that I was struggling with readjustment issues and might make inappropriate comments during gatherings. She warned our church community that I was going through a difficult period and suggested they avoid bringing up topics that might trigger emotional responses. She even contacted my former high school friend's parents to explain that I was having challenges with civilian life and might not be the person they remembered. These communications explained why so many people in my life had become distant and uncomfortable around me over recent months. My own mother had been systematically poisoning my relationships while I was overseas serving my country. In Marcus's childhood room, which had been preserved exactly as he left it for college, I found something that made my hands shake. Behind his dresser, wedged between the wall and furniture, was a small recording device connected to a wire that ran through the heating vent toward my former bedroom. Following the wire path, I discovered that my parents had installed a complete surveillance system in what used to be my room. They had been recording every conversation I had during visits home, capturing private phone calls and monitoring any interactions with friends or girlfriends who visited the house. In my father's desk drawer, I found a collection of micro-cassette tapes labeled with dates corresponding to my visits home over the past year. Playing these recordings on an old tape player I found in the basement, I heard my own voice expressing normal frustrations about military life, concerns about family relationships, and personal doubts that any reasonable person might share with trusted family members. But listening to these recordings, I could understand how they might be interpreted by someone determined to build a case against my character. My comments about missing family during holidays could sound like resentment. My questions about why relatives seemed distant could be presented as paranoia. My frustrations with military bureaucracy could be framed as difficulty with authority. Most devastatingly, I found recordings where I had confided to my then-girlfriend Sarah about feeling like I was losing connection with my family. I had shared my confusion about why my parents seemed less interested in my life and achievements, wondering if I had done something to disappoint them. These private moments of vulnerability, recorded without my knowledge in what should have been the safety of my childhood home, had apparently been shared with relatives as evidence of my deteriorating mental state and growing disconnection from family values. The final piece of evidence I uncovered was a manila folder hidden in my father's locked desk drawer, labeled Johnnie Documentation. Inside were printed emails between my parents and Marcus copies of the surveillance recordings, and what appeared to be a formal timeline documenting my supposed behavioral decline. The timeline began 6 months earlier and included entries like, Johnnie seemed agitated during Easter visit, questioned family decisions, and showed signs of paranoia when asking about photo arrangements. Normal questions and reasonable concerns had been reframed as symptoms of psychological instability. But the most shocking discovery was finding evidence that this surveillance had captured something else entirely. The audio equipment had recorded conversations between my parents and Marcus, where they discussed their plan to manage the Johnnie situation and protect the family's reputation by gradually reducing his influence and involvement. I heard my own father's voice saying, Marcus has always been the stronger candidate for carrying on the family legacy, and my mother responding, we need to be careful about how we handle this transition so Johnnie doesn't become a problem. They had been treating me like a business liability to be managed rather than a son to be loved. The systematic erasure of my presence from family photos, legal documents, and social connections had been a coordinated campaign designed to ease me out of their lives while elevating Marcus to the position of sole heir and family representative. Sitting in that basement surrounded by boxes of my disappeared life, listening to my parents discuss my elimination from their future plans, I realized that tomorrow's Navy SEAL Commander promotion ceremony would reveal the magnitude of their mistake. They had chosen to erase the son who had achieved the military's highest honors while celebrating the one whose greatest accomplishment was successfully manipulating their emotions and expectations. The recording equipment they had used to build a case against my character had also documented their own betrayal in perfect detail. Tomorrow, when 300 Navy SEALs stood to honor my promotion to commander, my family would understand exactly what they had thrown away in their rush to anoint a golden child who had built his success on lies. That evening, I drove to Marcus's apartment complex in Norfolk, a modern development near the naval base where junior officers typically lived during their early career years. His building stood among several identical structures, all populated by military personnel who were building their futures through honest service and genuine achievement. I found Marcus on his balcony still wearing his service uniform from the day's festivities, a beer in one hand and his phone in the other. He was presumably calling friends to share news about his promotion celebration, basking in the attention and admiration that had become his primary source of satisfaction. When he saw me approaching through the sliding door, he had left open, his confident expression shifted to something more guarded, though he maintained his characteristic charm. Johnnie, what brings you by? Did you forget something at the house? His tone was casual, but I noticed how quickly he moved to close whatever application he had open on his phone. We need to talk, Marcus, about what's really been happening in our family. His laugh came too quickly, too practiced. I'm not sure what you mean. Everything's been pretty straightforward. I got promoted, the family celebrated, normal stuff. I sat down in the plastic chair across from him, studying the brother I thought I knew. Nothing about today felt normal to me. Our parents have systematically erased every trace of my existence from the house. My inheritance has been transferred to you. Family members who have known me for decades suddenly treat me like a stranger. And somehow, you're surprised that I have questions. Marcus took a long drink from his beer, buying time to formulate his response. When he finally spoke, his words carried a defensive edge that I had not heard from him before. Look, Mom and Dad make their own decisions about family stuff. I can't control how they feel about things or how they choose to distribute their assets. Maybe you should be asking yourself why they might have concerns about your behavior instead of blaming everyone else. The deflection was smooth, but not smooth enough to hide what was happening. My behavior. Marcus, I've been deployed overseas, serving my country while you completed training exercises in Virginia. What exactly about my behavior has been problematic? For the first time in our conversation, Marcus's composure cracked slightly. He set down his beer and looked directly at me with an expression I had never seen before, a combination of resentment and something that looked almost like hatred. You want to know the truth, Johnnie. I'm tired of living in your shadow. I'm older than you, but ever since we were kids, everything came easy for you. School sports, scholarships, military achievements. Everyone always talked about how smart you were, how accomplished you were, how proud they were of you. His voice was rising now, months or perhaps years of suppressed frustration finally breaking through the facade of brotherly support. Do you know what it's like to be the older brother who never quite measures up? To have people constantly compare your achievements to someone younger who seems to excel at everything without even trying. I stared at him, trying to process this revelation. Marcus, you're talking about things from high school. We're adults now. We're both serving our country. There's no competition between us. There's always been competition between us, he shouted, standing up so abruptly that his chair scraped against the concrete balcony. And you always won, until I decided to change the rules. The admission hung in the air between us like a confession of guilt. I felt my stomach drop as I began to understand the implications of what he was revealing. What do you mean you changed the rules? Marcus began pacing the small balcony, his military bearing replaced by something more frantic. I mean, I got tired of watching you succeed while I struggled to get noticed. So I started taking steps to level the playing field. What kind of steps? He stopped pacing and looked at me with an expression that was equal parts defiance and shame. I've been managing the information flow between you and the rest of the family, intercepting some of your calls, filtering your messages, providing context for your communications that help them understand your real intentions. The euphemistic language could not disguise what he was describing. You've been sabotaging my relationships with our parents. I've been protecting them from your growing instability and selfishness. You're so focused on your military career that you've forgotten about family obligations and responsibilities. Someone needed to help them see that. I felt anger building in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. Give me specific examples, Marcus. What exactly have you told them about my supposed instability? His defiance was crumbling, now replaced by the desperate justifications of someone whose lies were being exposed. Things you said during phone calls, comments you made during visits that showed you're changing priorities, like when you talked about feeling disconnected from civilian life, or when you questioned why they weren't asking more about your deployments. Those were normal concerns that I shared with people I trusted. How did those conversations become evidence of psychological problems? Marcus walked back to his chair and sat down heavily, suddenly looking older than his 30 years. I kept notes about your conversations, your mood changes, your reactions to family situations. I documented patterns that suggested you were becoming unreliable and possibly unstable. The revelation that my own brother had been conducting surveillance on my emotional state, treating my private thoughts as intelligence to be gathered and weaponized, felt like a physical blow. You kept notes about my personal life. He reached into his apartment and returned with a leather journal that he placed on the small table between us. Everything's in here. Dates, times, specific quotes, behavioral observations. I wanted to make sure I could provide concrete examples if our parents had questions about my concerns. I opened the journal and found page after page of entries documenting my visits, home phone conversations, and interactions with family members. Marcus had recorded my frustrations, my questions, my moments of doubt, and my personal struggles with the cold precision of an intelligence operative building a case against an enemy target. One entry from 3 months earlier read, "Johnnie seemed paranoid about family photo arrangements, asked multiple questions about why his pictures had been moved, suggested he may be developing obsessive tendencies about his place in family hierarchy." Another entry from last Christmas stated, "Johnnie expressed resentment about family focus on Marcus's achievements, indicated jealousy about parental attention distribution. Possible signs of narcissistic injury and competitive dysfunction." Every normal human emotion, every reasonable question, every moment of vulnerability had been clinical documented and reframed as evidence of character defects and psychological problems. "Marcus, this is not normal behavior. This is espionage against your own brother." His response revealed the depth of his betrayal. "I also took the liberty of contacting some of your friends and ex-girlfriends to get their perspectives on changes in your personality and behavior patterns." The admission hit me like ice water. "You contacted Sarah and Jennifer. I wanted to provide Mom and Dad with a complete picture of how your military service was affecting your civilian relationships. Sarah mentioned that you had become more distant and questioning about family dynamics. Jennifer said you seemed less interested in maintaining connections with people from before your deployments. I understood now why both relationships had ended with confusion and distance, rather than clear explanations. My ex-girlfriends had not simply lost interest. They had been contacted by my own brother, who had convinced them that I was developing psychological problems and becoming an unreliable partner. You destroyed my relationships by lying to people who cared about me. I provided context that helped them understand behavioral changes they were already noticing. If your relationships couldn't survive honest evaluation, maybe they weren't as strong as you thought." The justification was so twisted that I struggled to respond. But Marcus was not finished with his revelations. From inside his apartment, he retrieved a folder containing documents I recognized as applications and forms bearing my signature. "I've also been handling some of your administrative responsibilities to take pressure off you during your deployments." I examined the papers and felt my world shift again. These were loan applications, benefit claims, and financial documents that I had never seen before, all containing forged versions of my signature and personal information. "Marcus, this is identity theft. These applications are for accounts and benefits that I never requested. I've been consolidating your military benefits and compensation to help manage your financial obligations more efficiently. With your permission, of course. I never gave you permission for any of this. I never even knew these accounts existed." His voice took on a threatening edge that I had never heard from him before. "Be very careful about how you handle this information, Johnnie. If you decide to make accusations about my efforts to help manage your affairs, I have extensive documentation about your behavioral problems and psychological decline that would be very damaging to your military career." The threat was clear: expose his crimes, and he would destroy my reputation with fabricated evidence of mental instability. He had spent months building a case against my character specifically to use as leverage if his other activities were discovered. "You're blackmailing me. I'm protecting both of us. Your psychological evaluation records would be very concerning to your commanding officers. Questions about your stability and reliability could end your career advancement permanently." I realized that Marcus had not simply been competing with me for family attention. He had been systematically destroying my life while building his own success on stolen achievements and fabricated credentials. The brother I had trusted and supported throughout our childhood had become my most dangerous enemy, using family connections and intimate knowledge to wage psychological warfare against me. But what Marcus did not know, what none of them knew, was that tomorrow's ceremony would reveal achievements he could never claim and honors that would expose his own mediocrity in devastating detail. The identity he had been stealing belonged to someone who had earned recognition at the highest levels of military command, and his threats would crumble when the truth about both of our careers became public knowledge. I drove home to my apartment in Virginia Beach that night, feeling like my entire understanding of reality had been turned upside down. The small one-bedroom place I rented near the naval base suddenly felt like the only honest space in my life. The only location where I could trust that my thoughts and actions were not being monitored, recorded, or reinterpreted by people who claimed to love me. Sitting at my kitchen table with Marcus's journal open in front of me, I forced myself to read every entry he had made about my supposed psychological decline. The clinical language he used to describe normal human emotions and reasonable questions made me wonder if I had been losing my grip on reality without realizing it. Had I really been paranoid about the family photo arrangements, or was it reasonable to notice when your face had been systematically removed from every image in your childhood home? Had I actually expressed inappropriate resentment about attention distribution? Or had I simply wondered why my military service seemed to matter less than my brother's training exercises? For the first time in months, I pulled out my military service record and spread the documents across my kitchen table. The commendations, deployment records, and performance evaluations told a story that contradicted everything my family believed about my character and achievements. Letters from commanding officers described my leadership under pressure, strategic thinking, in combat situations, and dedication to protecting civilian populations during overseas operations. Performance reviews consistently rated my service as exemplary, with specific mentions of my ability to remain calm under extreme stress and make decisions that saved lives. The disconnect between my documented military performance and my family's perception of my psychological stability was so dramatic that I began to question whether I had somehow been living a double life without realizing it. The next morning, I decided to visit the Hendersons' longtime family friends who had known me since childhood and might be able to provide an outside perspective on recent changes in family dynamics. Tom and Linda Henderson lived 3 streets over from my parents, and their house had been a second home during my teenage years. Linda answered the door with a surprised but genuinely warm smile, the first authentic positive reaction I had received from anyone connected to my family in months. "Johnnie, what a wonderful surprise. Come in. Come in. Tom will be so happy to see you." But as we sat in their familiar living room, the conversation took a disturbing turn that revealed the extent of my parents' campaign against my reputation. "We've been so worried about you, honey," Linda said, her voice carrying the careful tone people use when discussing someone's health problems. "Your mother mentioned that you've been going through a difficult adjustment period since your last deployment." Tom nodded gravely from his recliner. "She said you might seem a bit distant or troubled if we ran into you around the neighborhood. We understand that military service can be really challenging for some people, especially the younger guys who haven't had time to develop proper coping mechanisms." I felt my stomach clench as I realized that my parents had been preparing their social circle to expect psychological problems from me, creating a narrative that would make any normal behavior seem like evidence of instability. "What specific concerns did my mother share with you?" Linda and Tom exchanged a glance before Linda continued. "She mentioned that you've been having trouble readjusting to civilian interactions and might say things that seem inappropriate or concerning. She asked us to be understanding if you seemed different from the boy we remember. She also said you've been having some challenges with family relationships," Tom added, "something about feeling disconnected from family values and questioning authority structures. She wanted us to know in case you reached out for support." The conversation revealed that my parents had systematically contacted their entire social network to preemptively explain away any behavior from me that might contradict their narrative about my psychological decline. They had created a situation where anything I said or did would be interpreted through the lens of mental instability. "Have you noticed any concerning changes in my behavior during our conversations today?" I asked. The Hendersons looked confused. "Not at all, sweetie. You seem like the same thoughtful, articulate young man you've always been." Maybe a little more serious, but that's probably natural given your military responsibilities. Their assessment confirmed what I had suspected. The psychological problems my parents described existed only in their imagination and Marcus's fabricated documentation. That afternoon, I decided to contact my commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Hughes, to discuss the situation without revealing the full extent of my family's betrayal. During our phone conversation, she provided information that changed my understanding of recent events completely. Johnny, I'm glad you called. I've been trying to reach you about some important developments, but the messages I sent to your family address seem to have gotten lost in the mail system. My blood turned cold. What kind of messages? Official correspondence about your promotion ceremony and some recognition that's been approved at the highest levels. I sent everything to your emergency contact address since you've been traveling for training exercises. My emergency contact address was my parents' house, the same location where Marcus had been intercepting my mail and communications for months. Colonel Hughes, could you tell me more about this recognition? Her voice carried excitement that made my heart race. Johnny, you've been selected for promotion to Navy SEAL Commander, and Admiral Thompson specifically requested that your ceremony be expanded to include special recognition for your actions during Operation Silent Shield. Operation Silent Shield was a classified mission I had led 6 months earlier involving the rescue of American civilians from a hostile situation overseas. The operation had required split-second decision-making and coordinated actions that prevented what could have become an international incident. The ceremony is scheduled for tomorrow at 1400 hours, and Admiral Thompson wanted me to confirm your guest list since this will be a significant event. We're expecting approximately 300 Navy SEALs from across the region to attend, plus senior military officials and some civilian leadership. I realized that Marcus had been planning to attend this ceremony not as my family support, but as an imposter attempting to claim recognition that belonged to me. The identity theft I had discovered was not just about family finances. He had been positioning himself to steal military honors that could define an entire career. Colonel Hughes, there may have been some confusion about my contact information. Could you tell me more about the specific recognition being presented? Without going into classified details over the phone, I can tell you that your actions during Operation Silent Shield have been recommended for the Medal of Honor. Admiral Thompson believes your leadership prevented loss of civilian life and potentially avoided military escalation that could have had international consequences. The Medal of Honor. The military's highest recognition for valor, awarded only to service members who demonstrate extraordinary heroism in combat situations. Marcus had been planning to impersonate me at a ceremony where I would receive the nation's most prestigious military award. The ceremony will also include a video message from senior government officials, and there's been discussion about potential presidential recognition for your service record. I hung up the phone, understanding that tomorrow would not simply expose my family's mistake in choosing Marcus as their golden child. It would reveal that they had systematically erased and betrayed a son who served at the highest levels of national security, whose actions had protected American lives and prevented international crisis. That evening, I conducted research into Marcus's actual military service record through channels available to me as a Navy SEAL commander. What I discovered completed the picture of his deception. Marcus's service record showed that during the time period when he claimed to be participating in advanced training exercises, he had actually been assigned to administrative duties at a supply depot in Norfolk. While I was leading special operations missions overseas, he was processing paperwork and managing inventory for basic supplies. His promotion to lieutenant was routine advancement based on time in service, rather than exceptional performance or leadership demonstration. His training record showed no special qualifications, no advanced certifications, and no recognition for outstanding service. The strategic insights and military expertise he had been sharing with our family were actually details from my own classified operations information he had obtained by intercepting my confidential communications and repackaging my experiences as his own achievements. Marcus had built his entire military reputation on stolen valor, using my classified operational details to enhance his own credibility while simultaneously undermining my standing with our family. He had convinced our parents that he was the accomplished military son while the real achievements belonged to the brother they were systematically erasing from their lives. But tomorrow, when Admiral Thompson announced the details of Operation Silent Shield and 300 Navy SEALs stood to honor my promotion to Commander, the truth about both brothers would be revealed in the most public and undeniable way possible. Marcus's web of lies would collapse in front of the people whose approval he had been desperate to earn, and my family would understand the magnitude of their betrayal. The identity theft, forged documents, and fraudulent benefit claims would be exposed as federal crimes committed against someone who served at the highest levels of military command. Marcus's military career would end in disgrace, while mine reached its highest recognition. Justice was coming, and it would arrive with the precision and overwhelming force of 300 Navy SEALs standing in unified respect for achievements that could never be stolen, fabricated, or transferred to someone who had built his success on lies. The next morning brought the kind of crystal-clear Virginia sunshine that seemed designed for momentous occasions. I stood in my apartment bathroom carefully preparing my dress uniform for what would become the most important day of my military career and the most revealing moment in my family's history. Each piece of the uniform carried meaning that my family had never understood. The ribbons represented operations they knew nothing about, campaigns they had never acknowledged, and sacrifices they had dismissed as routine military service. Today, those ribbons would tell the complete story in front of witnesses who understood their true significance. At 0800 hours, I reported to the naval base for final preparation meetings with Admiral Thompson and his staff. The ceremony planning revealed the magnitude of what my family had been systematically ignoring while they celebrated Marcus's administrative achievements. Admiral Thompson's office overlooked the training facilities where I had spent countless hours preparing for missions that most people would never know existed. He was a man whose own service record included commendations at the highest levels, and his respect carried weight throughout the military community. Commander Miller, he began using my new rank for the first time in an official capacity. Today's ceremony represents more than a promotion. Your actions during Operation Silent Shield demonstrated the kind of leadership that defines what it means to be a Navy SEAL. He handed me a classified briefing document that outlined the specific details of my mission that would be declassified for today's ceremony. Reading through the operational summary, I was reminded of decisions made under extreme pressure, split-second choices that had determined whether American civilians lived or died. The mission you led required coordinating 17 different military assets across 4 time zones while maintaining communication with diplomatic personnel and civilian leadership. Your strategic planning prevented what intelligence estimates suggest could have escalated into regional conflict involving multiple nation-states. The document detailed how my team had extracted 43 American civilians from a compound controlled by hostile forces, using tactics that I had developed specifically for that operational environment. The extraction had been completed without loss of life and without creating the international incident that could have resulted from a more aggressive approach. Commander, the President himself has been briefed on your actions. While he cannot attend today's ceremony, he will be participating via secure video conference to personally express the nation's gratitude for your service. I realized that tomorrow's local newspaper would carry headlines about a ceremony that my family had been systematically ignoring while they planned celebrations for Marcus's routine promotion to lieutenant. The contrast between their perceptions and reality would be documented for the entire community to witness. Admiral, there's something I need to inform you about regarding my family situation and potential security concerns for today's ceremony. I provided Admiral Thompson with a carefully edited summary of Marcus's identity theft forged documents and fraudulent benefit claims, focusing on the potential security implications rather than the personal betrayal aspects. His response was immediate and decisive. Commander, this information suggests federal crimes that compromise military security. I'm ordering an immediate investigation by naval intelligence and military police. Within 2 hours, investigators had confirmed the forged signatures, fraudulent applications, and illegal access to my military benefits. They discovered that Marcus had been collecting payments meant for me, while simultaneously providing false information to our family about my service record and achievements. The implications extend beyond financial fraud, the lead investigator informed Admiral Thompson. Impersonating a Navy SEAL commander is a federal crime under stolen valor statutes. If he planned to attend today's ceremony representing himself as the honoree, he would face additional charges for impersonating a military officer. I explained Marcus's history of intercepting my communications and his plan to attend the ceremony as family support, though I suspected his true intention was to position himself to claim recognition that belonged to me. We'll have military police standing by, but will allow events to unfold naturally unless he attempts to interfere with the ceremony or misrepresent his identity, Admiral Thompson decided. Sometimes the most effective justice comes from letting people's own actions reveal their character. The ceremony planning continued with details that demonstrated the significance of the recognition I was receiving. 300 Navy SEALs from bases across the eastern United States would attend, representing the largest gathering of special operations personnel in Virginia Beach's history. Local television news crews had been approved to cover portions of the ceremony, meaning that my promotion and recognition would be broadcast throughout the region where my family lived and worked. The community that had been told I was struggling with psychological problems would witness me receiving the military's highest honors. Commander, we've also arranged for your ceremony to be transmitted to deployed units worldwide, allowing your fellow service members in operational theaters to participate in recognizing your achievements, Admiral Thompson's aide informed me. I thought about Marine soldiers, sailors, and airmen in dangerous locations around the world who would pause their own missions to honor achievements they understood from their own experience. The respect of people who faced similar challenges carried weight that no civilian recognition could match. During the final planning session, I made a decision that would complete the revelation my family needed to experience. I contacted extended relatives directly using my military credentials to verify my identity and bypass Marcus's communication interference. I called my grandmother, Helen, Uncle David, Aunt Sarah, and cousins Tyler and Madison, inviting them to attend what I described as an important military ceremony that would clarify some recent misunderstandings about family dynamics. Johnnie, honey, it's so good to hear from you directly. My grandmother said, her voice carrying confusion and concern. Your parents have been so worried about you, and Marcus mentioned that you've been having some difficulties adjusting to civilian life. Grandma Helen, I'd like you to attend a ceremony at the naval base tomorrow at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I think it will help clear up some misconceptions about my military service and current situation. I provided similar invitations to other family members, being careful not to reveal the specific nature of the recognition I would receive. I wanted them to witness the truth rather than simply hear about it secondhand through family gossip and speculation. Uncle David's response was particularly telling. I'll be there, Johnnie. To be honest, I've been concerned about some of the things your parents have been saying about your behavior. You've always been a good kid, and I want to understand what's really happening. By the end of the day, I had confirmed attendance from relatives who had been systematically turned against me through months of manipulation and false information. They would witness not just my promotion ceremony, but the exposure of lies that had poisoned their perception of my character and achievements. That evening, I received a text message from Marcus. Looking forward to supporting you at tomorrow's ceremony. Proud to be there for your recognition. His message confirmed that he still believed he could attend the ceremony and somehow benefit from the recognition I would receive. He had no understanding that military police would be monitoring his attendance, or that the ceremony would expose his crimes in front of 300 witnesses who understood the significance of stolen valor. I also received a call from my mother, who sounded confused about the invitation I had extended to family members. Johnnie, Marcus mentioned that you have some kind of military event tomorrow. We weren't sure if we should attend since you've been so distant lately, but we don't want to miss anything important. Her tone suggested that she expected a routine ceremony, possibly remedial training or counseling related to the psychological problems she believed I was experiencing. She had no concept that she was invited to witness her son receive recognition that would place him among the most decorated service members of his generation. "Mom, I think it would be important for you and Dad to attend. The ceremony will address some of the concerns you've had about my military service and current situation." As I prepared for sleep that night, I thought about the 28 years of my life that had led to tomorrow's moment of truth. The childhood achievements that had been erased, the family relationships that had been poisoned, and the identity that had been stolen would all be restored in front of witnesses who understood honor, sacrifice, and genuine accomplishment. Marcus would face military justice for crimes that carried serious federal penalties. My parents would confront the devastating reality of their favoritism and manipulation. Extended family members would understand how they had been misled about my character and achievements. But most importantly, 300 Navy SEALs would stand in unified recognition of service that represented the highest ideals of military excellence. Their respect would validate achievements that my family had dismissed and honor sacrifices that civilian recognition could never fully comprehend. Tomorrow would bring justice with the precision and overwhelming force that only truth can deliver. The morning of the ceremony arrived with the kind of crisp autumn weather that made Virginia Beach look like a postcard. I stood in my apartment at 0600 hours completing the final preparations for what would become the most significant day in both my military career and my family's understanding of who their sons really were. My dress uniform hung perfectly pressed, each ribbon and insignia positioned according to regulations that reflected years of exemplary service. The Navy SEAL trident on my chest represented qualifications that fewer than 3,000 active duty personnel had earned. Today, it would be joined by recognition that would place my service among the most distinguished in modern military history. At 0900 hours, I arrived at the naval base for final coordination with ceremony officials. The main auditorium had been transformed into a venue worthy of the recognition being presented, with seating arranged for 300 Navy SEALs, plus senior military officials, civilian leadership, and family guests. Admiral Thompson met me in the preparation area behind the main stage, his expression carrying the gravity appropriate for the occasion. "Commander Miller, in 30 minutes will begin a ceremony that honors not just your individual achievements, but the values that define military service at its highest level. Your family will witness recognition that reflects extraordinary dedication to protecting American lives and interests." Through the preparation area, windows, I could see guests beginning to arrive. 300 Navy SEALs in dress uniform created an impressive display of military precision and mutual respect. These were men who understood combat sacrifice and the weight of decisions made under extreme pressure. At 10:30 hours, I spotted my family's arrival through the main entrance. My parents, Robert and Patricia, walked with Marcus between them, their formal attire suggesting they expected an important occasion without understanding its true significance. Behind them, I recognized extended family members including my grandmother, Helen, Uncle David, Aunt Sarah, and cousins Tyler and Madison. Their expressions carried curiosity mixed with concern, the look of people attending an event they did not fully understand, but felt obligated to support. My mother carried flowers apparently intended as congratulations for whatever routine recognition she assumed I would receive. Marcus wore his service dress uniform with the lieutenant insignia that had been celebrated so enthusiastically just 2 days earlier. He moved with the confidence of someone who believed he belonged among military personnel of higher rank and greater achievement. What he could not see were the military police officers positioned throughout the auditorium, monitoring his presence as part of the ongoing investigation into his fraudulent activities. At 1100 hours, the ceremony began with traditional military protocol. A honor guard presented the colors while 300 Navy SEALs stood in perfect unison, their discipline and precision demonstrating the standards that defined their brotherhood. Admiral Thompson took the podium and began his opening remarks, explaining the significance of the day's recognition to an audience that included people with varying levels of military knowledge. "Ladies and gentlemen, we gather today to honor extraordinary service that exemplifies the highest traditions of naval special operations. The achievements we celebrate represent actions taken under extreme conditions to protect American lives and prevent international crisis. I could see my family's faces from my position on the platform, their expressions shifting from polite attention to growing confusion as the Admiral's description suggested recognition far beyond what they had expected. 6 months ago, during Operation Silent Shield, a classified mission in a hostile environment overseas, American civilians were trapped in a compound controlled by enemy forces. The extraction required coordinating multiple military assets while maintaining diplomatic protocols and avoiding actions that could escalate into regional conflict. The Admiral's words carried weight that civilians might not fully grasp, but every Navy SEAL in the audience understood the complexity and danger of the operation being described. The mission commander demonstrated strategic thinking and leadership under pressure that prevented loss of civilian life, while avoiding military escalation that could have had international consequences. His planning and execution saved 43 American civilians while maintaining operational security that protected ongoing diplomatic efforts. I watched Marcus's expression change as he realized that the ceremony was describing achievements that exceeded anything in his own service record. His confident posture began to shift into something more uncertain as the magnitude of the recognition became clear. Today, we promote to Navy SEAL Commander a service member whose actions represent the difference between successful operations and potential disaster, between saved lives and casualties that could have changed the course of international relations. Admiral Thompson paused and looked directly toward the section where my family sat among the civilian guests. Commander Johnnie Miller, please step forward to receive recognition for extraordinary heroism during Operation Silent Shield. The moment when 300 Navy SEALs stood in perfect unison to honor my promotion created a sound like thunder rolling across the auditorium. Their synchronized movement demonstrated respect that could not be fabricated, purchased, or transferred to someone who had not earned it through genuine service and sacrifice. I walked to center stage while my family sat in stunned silence, their understanding of recent events beginning to shift as they witnessed recognition that contradicted everything they believed about my military service and personal achievements. Admiral Thompson continued reading from my citation describing tactical decisions and leadership actions that required classification levels Marcus had never possessed. The detailed account of my planning and execution during Operation Silent Shield revealed expertise that could only come from actual combat experience and advanced training. Commander Miller's strategic coordination prevented potential loss of civilian life while avoiding military escalation that intelligence estimates suggest could have led to regional conflict involving multiple nation-states. The citation included details about split-second decisions made under extreme pressure, coordination of assets across multiple time zones, and communication with diplomatic personnel at the highest levels of government. These were responsibilities that required security clearances and operational experience that Marcus had never approached. His actions during this mission have been recommended for the Medal of Honor, representing recognition, reserved for extraordinary heroism in combat situations. The announcement that I was receiving the Medal of Honor recommendation created a reaction throughout the auditorium that left no doubt about the significance of the recognition. 300 Navy SEALs understood exactly what those words meant, and their continued standing position demonstrated respect for achievements that represented the absolute pinnacle of military service. I could see my parents' faces clearly, now their expressions showing the beginning of understanding about the magnitude of their mistake. My mother's hands were trembling as she realized that the son they had systematically erased from family photos and legal documents was receiving recognition that placed him among the most decorated service members of his generation. Marcus's face had turned pale as he comprehended that the achievements being described exceeded his own service record by orders of magnitude. The brother he had been systematically undermining had earned recognition at levels he could never reach through his own merit and accomplishment. Admiral Thompson was not finished with his revelations. I'm also pleased to announce that Commander Miller's service record and actions during Operation Silent Shield have earned recognition from the highest levels of civilian leadership. A large screen descended behind the podium, and suddenly the President of the United States appeared via secure video conference, addressing the ceremony from the Oval Office. Commander Miller, on behalf of the American people, I want to personally thank you for extraordinary service that protected American lives and prevented international crisis. Your actions during Operation Silent Shield demonstrate the caliber of leadership that makes our military forces the finest in the world. The President's personal recognition broadcast live to the ceremony and transmitted to military units worldwide represented validation that transcended anything my family could have imagined. This was not routine recognition or participation awards. This was acknowledgement from the Commander-in-Chief for actions that had affected national security at the highest levels. Commander Miller, your service record reflects the values and dedication that define American military excellence. The nation is grateful for your sacrifice and proud of your achievements. When the President's message concluded, the auditorium erupted in sustained applause from 300 Navy SEALs who understood exactly what they had witnessed. My family sat in silence, their worldview shifting as they processed the reality of who their sons actually were. During the sustained ovation, military police approached Marcus and quietly informed him that he needed to accompany them for questioning regarding ongoing investigations into fraudulent activities and identity theft. His parents watched in horror as their golden child was escorted away from a ceremony honoring achievements he could never legitimately claim. The ceremony concluded with the presentation of my Medal of Honor recommendation and promotion certificate documents that represented recognition at the absolute pinnacle of military achievement. As I stood before 300 Navy SEALs who had dedicated their careers to similar service, I felt validation that transcended any civilian approval or family acceptance. My parents and extended family remained in their seats long after other guests had departed, struggling to process the complete reversal of their understanding about their son's relative worth and achievement. The golden child they had chosen to elevate and protect had been exposed as a criminal, while the son they had systematically erased had received recognition that would define his place in military history. Justice had arrived with the precision and overwhelming force that only truth can deliver, witnessed by people who understood honor, sacrifice, and genuine accomplishment. The lies that had poisoned family relationships and stolen years of mutual respect had been exposed in the most public and undeniable way possible. In the hours following the ceremony, my family experienced what could only be described as a complete reconstruction of their understanding about both their sons and their own judgment. The reception area outside the Naval Base Auditorium became a location where years of manipulation, favoritism, and systematic erasure would be addressed with the honesty that authentic relationships require. My grandmother, Helen, was the first family member to approach me after the ceremony concluded. Her face showed the weight of someone who had realized they had been fundamentally deceived about something that mattered deeply to them. "Johnnie, honey, I owe you an apology that I'm not sure I can ever adequately express," she said, her voice trembling with emotion and regret. "Your parents convinced me that you were struggling with your military service and having difficulty maintaining family relationships. I believed them because I trusted their judgment about their own children." She paused to collect herself before continuing. "What we witnessed today makes it clear that we have been systematically lied to about your achievements and character. The recognition you received represents service that I never imagined any member of our family would achieve. I am ashamed that I allowed myself to be turned against you based on false information." My Uncle David joined our conversation, his expression carrying the confusion of someone whose fundamental assumptions had been proven wrong. "Johnnie, I need to understand how this happened. Your parents told me you were having psychological problems and difficulty adjusting to civilian life. They said you would become unreliable and possibly unstable. But what we saw today was recognition for extraordinary military leadership and heroism." I explained carefully without revealing classified details that Marcus had been systematically intercepting my communications with family members and providing false information about my service record and mental state. The surveillance equipment, forged documents, and fraudulent benefit claims were part of a coordinated effort to replace my achievements with his fabricated accomplishments. He has been stealing your identity and military honors while convincing us that you were the problem. Uncle David asked, his voice rising with anger and disbelief. The investigation will determine the full extent of his fraudulent activities, but yes, he has been building his reputation on my classified operational details while simultaneously undermining my relationships with everyone in our family. Aunt Sarah and cousins Tyler and Madison gathered around us, each expressing shock and apologizing for their recent treatment based on false information they had received. Johnnie, we stopped inviting you to family gatherings because your parents said you might make other people uncomfortable with inappropriate behavior, Aunt Sarah admitted. We thought we were protecting you from situations that might be stressful during your psychological recovery. They told us you were becoming paranoid and resentful about family attention and achievements, Tyler added. We avoided discussing military topics around you because they said it might trigger emotional responses that would be difficult for you to handle. Madison's apology was particularly painful because it revealed how extensively my parents had poisoned relationships with people I had known my entire life. Mom told me that you had been expressing jealousy about Marcus's success and that you might try to minimize his achievements if we brought them up in conversation. We thought we were being considerate by focusing our attention on him instead of making you feel bad about the differences in your military careers. The systematic nature of my parents' campaign became clear as each family member described the specific warnings and explanations they had received about my supposed psychological decline and behavioral problems. When my parents finally approached our group, their expression showed people who understood they had made catastrophic errors in judgment that had damaged relationships beyond easy repair. My father, Robert, looked older than I had ever seen him, his usual confidence replaced by something that resembled genuine humility. Johnnie, I don't know how to begin apologizing for what we have done to you and our family. We made decisions based on information that we now understand was completely false. We trusted Marcus because he was telling us things we wanted to believe about family dynamics and your commitment to family values. My mother, Patricia, could barely speak through her tears and obvious shame. We removed your pictures from the house and transferred your inheritance to Marcus because we believed you were becoming disconnected from the family and might not appreciate the importance of family legacy. Marcus convinced us that you had lost respect for family traditions and were more focused on your military career than maintaining family relationships. You legally erased me from family documents based on lies Marcus told you about my psychological state and family loyalty. I said keeping my voice calm but clear about the magnitude of their actions. We realize now that we have been manipulated by someone who was willing to destroy family relationships to benefit his own reputation and financial situation. My father continued. The recognition you received today makes it clear that we have systematically undermined our most accomplished child while elevating someone who built his success on deception and fraud. The conversation was interrupted by Admiral Thompson, who approached our family group with information about the investigation into Marcus's fraudulent activities. Commander Miller, I wanted to update you and your family about the status of our investigation into the identity theft and benefit fraud allegations. He explained that military police had confirmed multiple federal crimes, including forged signatures on official documents, fraudulent collection of military benefits, and attempted impersonation of a commissioned officer. Marcus faced potential prosecution under both military and civilian legal systems. The charges include stolen valor violations, which carry serious penalties under federal law. Mr. Marcus Miller will receive a dishonorable discharge from military service and faces potential imprisonment for crimes committed against military personnel and government systems. My parents listened in shocked silence as they learned that their golden child would face federal prosecution for crimes committed against the brother they had systematically betrayed and erased. Additionally, we discovered that he had been accessing classified information intended for Commander Miller and using operational details in his own military reports. This represents security violations that compound the existing charges. Admiral Thompson's final revelation completed the exposure of Marcus's deception. Our investigation revealed that Mr. Marcus Miller's actual military service record consists entirely of administrative and supply management duties. He has never participated in combat operations, special training exercises, or leadership responsibilities beyond basic supervisory functions. The strategic insights and military expertise that Marcus had been sharing with our family were stolen directly from my classified operational reports, repackaged as his own experiences and achievements. After Admiral Thompson departed my family and I continued our conversation in the reception area, while other ceremony guests offered their congratulations and support. Fellow Navy SEALs approached throughout the afternoon, each expressing respect for achievements they understood from their own similar experiences. Their recognition felt authentic in a way that civilian approval never could, representing validation from people who had faced similar challenges and understood the weight of decisions made under extreme pressure. Commander Miller, your planning during Operation Silent Shield set a new standard for extraction operations in the hostile environments, one colleague told me. The techniques you developed are now being taught at advanced training facilities to prepare other units for similar missions. These conversations took place in front of family members who were beginning to understand that the son they had erased from family photos was contributing to military knowledge at the highest levels of special operations. As the afternoon progressed, extended family members worked to rebuild relationships based on truth rather than manipulation. My grandmother Helen became particularly vocal about ensuring that family gatherings would reflect accurate understanding of both sons' achievements and character. From now on, family celebrations will acknowledge genuine accomplishments rather than fabricated achievements, she declared. We have learned a difficult lesson about the importance of verifying information before making judgments about family members. Uncle David took responsibility for ensuring that family financial and legal documents would be corrected to reflect accurate information about both sons. The inheritance transfers and business document changes will be reversed immediately. We cannot undo the emotional damage that has been caused, but we can correct the legal and financial aspects of this situation. Throughout these conversations, my parents struggled with the magnitude of their errors and the time that would be required to rebuild trust through consistent actions rather than words. We understand that apologies are not sufficient to repair the damage we have caused, my mother said. We hope that over time, through our actions rather than our words, we can demonstrate that we have learned from this experience and want to rebuild authentic relationships based on truth and mutual respect. I explained that forgiveness would be a process rather than an instant decision, requiring consistent demonstration of changed behavior over time. Family relationships must be based on mutual respect and honest communication. Trust has to be earned through actions that prove people value truth over convenient narratives. The most satisfying moment came when extended family members began asking genuine questions about my military service and expressing authentic interest in my experiences and perspectives. Johnnie, we want to understand more about your work and the missions you have completed, Aunt Sarah said. We realize that we have been missing important parts of your life because we believed false information about your character and achievements. These conversations revealed that family relationships could be rebuilt on stronger foundations when based on truth rather than manipulation and favoritism. As the sun set over Virginia Beach, I found myself surrounded by people who finally understood both their sons accurately. The golden child they had elevated and protected faced federal prosecution for crimes committed against his own brother, while the son they had systematically erased had received recognition that would define his place in military history. The 300 Navy SEALs who had stood to honor my promotion represented the kind of brotherhood that could not be bought, manipulated, or transferred to someone who had not earned it through genuine service and sacrifice. Their respect validated achievements that transcended any civilian recognition or family approval. Justice had been served with precision and overwhelming force, but more importantly, truth had created an opportunity for authentic relationships based on mutual respect and honest communication. The life lesson that emerged from this experience was clear: genuine family love, supports individual achievements rather than creating competition and erasure. Authentic relationships honor each person's unique contributions, rather than demanding conformity to family expectations that favor one member over others. When people show you who they are through their actions, believe them, but also recognize that growth and change become possible when truth replaces manipulation, and when respect becomes mutual rather than conditional. The ceremony that was meant to honor my military achievements had become a revelation that exposed years of family dysfunction while creating opportunities for rebuilding relationships on foundations of truth, respect, and authentic love. Have you ever experienced a situation where family favoritism or competition damaged relationships that should have been supportive? Sometimes the people closest to us can become our greatest obstacles when they choose to believe lies over truth, or elevate one person by diminishing another. I'd love to hear your thoughts about how families can rebuild trust after betrayal and whether you think forgiveness should be automatic or earned through changed behavior. If this story resonated with your own experiences or gave you a new perspective on family dynamics, please like this video and subscribe for more stories about overcoming adversity and finding strength in difficult situations. Share this with someone who might need to hear that their genuine achievements matter more than other people's approval or recognition. Remember that your worth is not determined by family dynamics or other people's perceptions, but by your own actions, character, and contributions to the world around you. Stay strong, keep believing in yourself, and never let anyone erase your accomplishments or value just because it makes them feel better about their own choices.